Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. The courtroom felt icy, much too chilly for the predicament I was facing. The judge's gavel had only just sounded when my wife, my almost former wife, reclined in her seat, wearing a triumphant grin as if victory was already hers. She crossed her legs with deliberate poise, her costly designer heels clicking softly against the gleaming floor. "Your Honor," she cooed, tracing a flawlessly polished nail along her cheek. "Let's be frank here. My husband," she shifted her gaze toward me, filled with disdain, "is like a draft horse, dependable, foreseeable, and extremely simple to control." The courtroom stirred with a few whispers, some sharp intakes of breath, and even a suppressed laugh from her attorney. The judge scarcely lifted an eyebrow before striking his gavel to restore order. I tightened my jaw, but I held my composure. Not yet. She was staging a show, and I refused to grant her the pleasure of watching me snap. The divorce had been her initiative, naturally. After 8 years together, she had concluded that I no longer satisfied her, no longer thrilled her, no longer matched the partner she believed she merited. Yet rather than departing gracefully, she had hauled me into this legal arena, intent on degrading me as she exited. She had already secured the house, the one I had constructed with my own effort. She had battled fiercely for half my company, despite having added nothing to its growth. And now, in this concluding session, she continued to drive the blade deeper. Her current partner sat in the rear row, observing with cool detachment. A high-powered attorney, sleek, self-assured, and everything she had persuaded herself she desired. She hadn't even tried to hide the affair. I had discovered them months earlier in our marital bed, tangled in linens I had purchased. But I refused to break because what she didn't realize was that this proceeding wasn't the ultimate confrontation. It was merely the prelude. Her attorney, a self-satisfied man in a luxurious suit, rose and straightened his tie. "Your Honor, my client simply wants to voice her worries about Mr. Hayes' capacity to sustain alimony over time. She made considerable personal compromises during the marriage, and she merits appropriate reimbursement for those years." Compromises. That was ironic. Judge Reynolds looked over his spectacles at me. "Mr. Hayes, do you wish to reply?" I drew a measured breath, fingers pressing against the table's edge. This was the instant. Gradually, with purpose, I reached up and loosened my dress shirt. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Even the judge inclined his head, evidently intrigued by my actions. I took my time. I wanted each moment to linger. Button by button, I released them, then slipped the shirt off entirely. And that's when the collective gasp began. Even my wife's grin disappeared. Her partner's entertained look shifted to discomfort. Because there I stood in the chill of the courtroom, utterly changed from the man my wife had ridiculed. The last time she had truly seen me, I had been out of shape, settled. A husband who had devoted too many years to laboring, supporting, giving without prioritizing my own well-being. I had been simple to overlook, simple to betray. But the figure before them now was strong, imposing, entirely renewed. I had dedicated months to this preparation, countless hours in the gym, training without mercy, forcing my body until discomfort became familiar. The excess weight from years of tension and fatigue had been exchanged for defined, controlled strength. Marks of hardship crossed my chest, the sort earned from a demanding existence. And above all, directly over my heart, I had added a tattoo. The design was recent enough that the shades were still vivid, but it was striking and intentional. A draft horse, shattering its restraints. The meaning wasn't missed by anyone, least of all my wife. She stared, eyes widened, lips parted slightly. Her attorney regained his footing swiftly. "Your Honor, I don't understand how this pertains to—" I interrupted him. My tone was steady, firm, yet sharp as ice. "You want to discuss compromises?" I faced the judge. For 8 years, I poured everything into this union. I took extra shifts so she could leave her job and pursue self-discovery. I covered her luxury purchases, her extravagant trips, her beauty enhancements. I even added her name to my enterprise, believing we were partners. I directed my eyes back to my wife, observing the pallor spread across her features. "And how did she return the favor?" I nodded toward the man in the back. "With him." More whispers rippled through the room. Her attorney attempted an objection, but Judge Reynolds raised a palm. "Allow him to continue." I acknowledged with a nod before proceeding. "You labeled me a draft horse, didn't you?" My mouth formed a gradual, intentional grin. "That's amusing because this draft horse is ready to trample right over you." Her face contorted. Alarm flashed in her gaze. I reached down, seizing a heavy folder from my seat. It landed on the table with a resounding smack. "Within this packet," I declared, my words clear and strong, are records demonstrating that you have engaged in financial misconduct, concealing funds, submitting false expenses from my company that had no connection to it." Her lips moved soundlessly, opening and closing. "And because of that," I went on, "I'm not merely removing your alimony demand, I'm countersuing for restitution." The room buzzed with murmurs. Her attorney hurried to scan his files while she remained motionless. Her meticulously rehearsed assurance lay in ruins. For the first time in months, I witnessed a new emotion in her eyes. Not superiority, not mockery, but dread, and we had only just begun. Her carefully built facade was fracturing further. My almost ex-wife remained rigid, her fingers clawing into the smooth surface of the plaintiff's table. The poised, scornful expression she had displayed earlier had given way to something far more gratifying. Terror. Her counsel, no longer grinning, rifled through documents, evidently caught off guard by the upheaval I had initiated. "Your Honor," he faltered, fidgeting with his tie. "I'd request a brief break to examine these alleged—" Judge Reynolds lifted a hand, cutting him off. "Not at this time." His piercing stare returned to me. "Mr. Hayes, you claim to possess proof that Mrs. Hayes engaged in financial misconduct," I affirmed with a nod, maintaining my relaxed yet assured stance despite my racing pulse. "Yes, Your Honor, irrefutable evidence." With that, I unsealed the folder, displaying sheet after sheet of wire transfers, fabricated expense logs, and concealed credit statements, all bearing my wife's name. It had required months to assemble this. When I first learned of her infidelity, I wasn't merely furious. I was determined. I understood I couldn't simply exit the marriage empty-handed, not after her actions. So I did what she never imagined possible. I outmaneuvered her. I engaged a specialist in financial forensics, an expert in uncovering deceit, and their discoveries were overwhelming. She had been gradually draining our shared funds, disguising it as legitimate business costs. Getaways with her lover, recorded as professional meetings. Large sums on high-end fashion, categorized as work attire. Even an initial payment on a private residence, where she likely intended to begin her fresh start after depleting my resources. And crucially, she had authorized everyone herself. Judge Reynolds examined the papers, his expression neutral, though I caught the subtle tightening of his eyes. "Mrs. Hayes," he eventually said, glancing up, "do you have any response to these?" I faced my wife, delivering the weight of my steady, unyielding look. She had always excelled at deception, but now she was floundering. "This is absurd," she burst out with an unsteady chuckle. "He's clearly fabricating it." "I would never, Your Honor," I interjected calmly. "Her signature appears on each improper entry. In fact," I retrieved another paper and passed it forward. "Here is correspondence where she directs the bookkeeper to transfer funds from our company account to her private reserve." Her complexion turned ashen. I had anticipated this reaction. "You breached my privacy?" she murmured, barely audible. "No," I answered evenly. "I merely obtained access to all corporate records linked to my firm, the same firm you attempted to seize." Judge Reynolds breathed out sharply, his frustration evident. "Mrs. Hayes, these are grave accusations. Your counsel will have opportunity to reply, but currently I intend to scrutinize the monetary assertions prior to deciding on support." Her attorney began speaking rapidly, searching his case for a solution. But none existed, not now. For the first time in our marriage, she lacked dominance over events, and I had more to reveal. The partner becomes implicated. I shifted slightly, glancing back directly at her new partner, the corporate attorney who had been so complacent earlier, relishing my supposed disgrace. No longer. His features had tensed, his fingers drumming restlessly on his thigh. I met his eyes and offered a gradual, informed smile. It was time to involve him. "Your Honor," I stated, rising, "I have one additional item of proof to present before proceeding." Judge Reynolds signaled for me to go ahead. I drew a compact drive from my pocket. "This holds audio recordings of discussions between Mrs. Hayes and Mr. Brooks." I indicated her partner, whose expression instantly hardened, in which they outlined their scheme to drain me financially prior to her filing. My wife's head jerked toward me sharply. "What?" she shrieked. "That's unlawful. You can't record private talks." I addressed the judge. "Your Honor, all captures occurred in my residence, in a jurisdiction permitting one-party agreement." Judge Reynolds lifted a brow before beckoning the officer to take the drive. "This will be examined," he noted. "If it verifies your claims, Mr. Hayes, this matter escalates beyond a standard divorce." The color fled from her partner's face, and in that instant I knew he was unaware. He had no clue she intended to ensnare him too. Perfect. I returned my focus to my wife, speaking softly so only she heard. "You believed you were manipulating me?" I whispered. "But you were always deceiving yourself." Her jaw locked tightly, audible tension in her teeth. I was no longer the draft horse. I was the one who had dismantled her future. The consequences unfold. The judge inhaled deeply. "In light of the severity of these assertions, I require time to assess all monetary records and proof before deciding. Meanwhile, all holdings stay restricted." Her head turned swiftly toward him in shock. "Restricted?" she echoed, voice faltering. "Yes," Judge Reynolds replied bluntly, "meaning no access to banking, company stakes, or shared properties until resolution." Her hands trembled visibly. She faced her attorney. "Fix this," she whispered fiercely. He merely massaged his forehead, appearing thoroughly overcome. In contrast, I resumed my seat, entirely serene, entirely in control, and observed her grasp the gravity of her plight. She had anticipated leaving affluent and triumphant. Instead, she was entirely isolated, and her partner, he was already glancing at his timepiece, seeming eager to escape. I looked at him once more, offering a faint grin. He wouldn't endure. She would soon discover how rapidly such men flee when funds vanish. But that was her concern now, as for the first time in ages I had prevailed. The frantic rhythm of my almost ex-wife's breathing echoed in the room, her flawless veneer disintegrating live. The judge's order to restrict her holdings had plunged her into chaos, her meticulously planned exit falling apart piece by piece. Yet I had more, as her counsel tried to mumble a reply, something about evaluating proof and reconsidering monetary aspects. I directed my focus to the individual who had aided in ruining my union, her partner, the influential corporate lawyer she had chosen over me. The same one so arrogant at the start, savoring my supposed shame with barely hidden glee. Now he appeared desperate to vanish. I eased back in my chair, granting him an aware grin. Time to intensify. "Your Honor," I declared, tone level. "Prior to recess, I'd like to submit a further motion concerning the misconduct probe." Judge Reynolds looked over his lenses. "Proceed, Mr. Hayes." I aimed my stare straight at my wife's partner. "As evident in the provided files," I stated, "numerous questionable transfers connect to Mr. Brooks." His head jerked up. "What?" he uttered hastily. I could almost detect perspiration at his brow. Judge Reynolds scanned the documents before addressing him. "Mr. Brooks, can you clarify your name's appearance here?" My ex-wife turned abruptly to him, eyes broad. She hadn't foreseen this. She had pulled him into her plot, but in his avarice he hadn't inquired deeply. "Your Honor, I don't know what he's referring to," Brooks stuttered. I laughed softly. "Really?" I inquired, head tilted. "Because these logs show several deposits to an account in your name, including—" I lifted another page. "A substantial advisory payment listed as professional fees." Judge Reynolds arched a brow. "Is this accurate, Mr. Brooks?" He hesitated, mouth working silently. "I don't manage individual transactions," I grinned. That was the elegance of the snare. He couldn't refute the trail. He had taken funds from my wife, probably without scrutiny, thinking it part of divorce tactics. But now, it appeared he was an accomplice in deceit. And for his profession, that spelled professional ruin. I witnessed the moment comprehension hit. He glared at my wife, not with affection, not loyalty, with outright resentment. "Jessica," he muttered angrily, voice hushed but intense. "What have you done?" She shook her head frantically. "Wait. No, this isn't. I had to rearrange funds, and you knew I needed to." Judge Reynolds exhaled heavily. "A complete forensic review of both sides' finances will be ordered. If Mr. Brooks participated knowingly, he too faces accountability." Brooks leaped up. "This is outrageous. I won't." "Sit down, Mr. Brooks," the judge commanded sharply, "or face contempt." Brooks halted. His livelihood hung in jeopardy. And Jessica, she at last comprehended my actions fully. Her funds gone, her properties locked. And now the man she saw as superior was poised to desert her. I relaxed in my chair, pulse even, hand steady. It was finished. She had been defeated. The instant everything collapsed. 15 minutes on, after recess was declared, I observed my almost ex-wife clutching desperately at her partner's sleeve. "Darling, hear me out," she begged, tone quivering. "You know I wouldn't involve you. It's merely financial matters. We'll resolve it." Brooks yanked free. "You fool," he snarled. "Do you realize your actions?" She blinked quickly, moisture gathering. "You promised we'd stay together," she murmured. "You promised. I promised many things." He raked fingers through his hair, appearing ill. I didn't agree to fraud probes, her breath caught. I rose, straightening my sleeves and passed them deliberately. As I went by, I bent close enough to murmur. Seems you miscalculated, dear. She whirled on me, gaze furious. You believe you've triumphed, she hissed, voice unsteady. You think this proves your strength? I smiled. A deliberate, triumphant smile. No, I replied, donning my coat. I think this grants me liberty. And then I departed, leaving her shattered, without resources, influence, or allies. Aftermath, receiving her due. A week on, a message arrived from an unfamiliar contact. I viewed it. It was Jessica. Jessica, I erred. Jessica, please, I only want to speak. Jessica, we can mend this. I chuckled, not bitterly, not angrily, a liberated chuckle. Then promptly I erased her text. No reply needed. I had expressed all required. The second I removed Jessica's note, an internal shift occurred. For the first time in months, indeed years, I felt unweighted, released, liberated. The woman who once controlled my existence was irrelevant now. Merely a name in legal papers. A cautionary tale of disloyalty, yet her decline continued. While I emerged victorious, she faced further losses, the aftermath, widespread disgrace. The following weeks brought turmoil for Jessica. Initially, the audit. The court initiated a thorough probe into her improper dealings. As anticipated, proof was conclusive. She had misappropriated from our enterprise, diverted assets to hidden holdings, and engaged in embezzlement. She wasn't merely forfeiting support. She risked prosecution, and then the separation. I had predicted Brooks would flee, but his speed surprised even me in betraying her. Merely 3 days post-hearing, his practice issued a public disclaimer. Leadership stated zero tolerance for misconduct, and Brooks quit preemptively. And Jessica? She was isolated, utterly, without partner, funds, or standing. Jessica's last appeal, I anticipated a final frantic effort. Indeed, one night as I completed my routine at home, she appeared. I heard the knock, firm yet uncertain. I debated ignoring. But then why deny the satisfaction? I answered, and there she was, Jessica Hayes, formerly my spouse. Now merely a shadow of her prior self. She still attempted composure, but desperation shone in her eyes. Her cosmetics overly precise, concealing her distress. Her luxury accessories absent, likely sold for survival. And her words came softer than ever. Hi, she said with a strained smile. Can we discuss? I rested against the frame, arms folded. What's left to say? I inquired, tone serene, impassive. She fidgeted, emitting an anxious laugh. Listen, I realize it became complicated. We had issues, but I simply gazed silent. I long for you, she eventually confessed. I lifted a brow. Do you? She gulped. Yes, we shared wonderful times, and I faltered. Things spiraled. I remained quiet, letting silence build. Jessica's expression shifted, facade slipping. Her tone sharpened. Come on, drop the arrogance for a moment. I'm attempting. I laughed lightly. There emerged the true Jessica, the one who sought to belittle me in court, who ridiculed my faithfulness, my reliability. Now seeking return, I inclined my head. You don't long for me, I stated directly. You long for the lifestyle I provided. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but she refrained, knowing truth. I have nothing now, she confessed, voice fracturing. No resources, no support. I need some assistance. Just temporarily until stable. The nerve nearly amused me, but I denied her desired response. Instead, I withdrew my wallet and offered a single bill. She gaped. What is this? She demanded. I smiled. My final kindness. Her cheeks burned with shame. You bastard. I closed the door on her, and that marked the final encounter with Jessica Hayes. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.